CalixBoxing.com, CalixBoxing2 over on Twitter, and CalixBoxing 2.0 right here on YouTube. Now over 5,000 subscribers strong. Appreciate all the support I'm getting. I'm humbled by it. I really do appreciate the archive views have been great. And if you are a lower weight class fan, this weekend is for you. One of the most action-packed weekends of boxing on paper coming up. Once this card was announced, I circled it and I said, oh my goodness, this is one to pay attention to right here, and arguably the card of the year. Entertainment, meaningful fights, and we'll get into this as the show goes on today. But first, let's talk about the cock block of the weekend. Because there was one when it came up to this card. And by the way, hit that like button as you come in and make sure to comment in the comment section. And if you're in the archives watching this, as most of you will be, leave a comment below. Tell us who you like in the fights coming up this weekend. But these are meaningful and action-packed fights on paper. And we'll get into betting odds in this show. And we'll also get into the impact and the matchups and all that good stuff. But yesterday it was announced that Julio Cesar Martinez, who cannot get out of his own way, pulled out of the fight due to illness, pulled out of the McWilliams-Arroyo fight this weekend. And that takes some spice off of the card, which is still a great card. Still a great card. Still have multiple meaningful fights on this card. But this one takes a little bit of spice off of the card. And Julio Cesar Martinez just can't get out of his own way. Talented fighter, talented young fighter, fun fighter to watch, but cannot get out of his own way. Julio Cesar Martinez's biggest enemy is the guy staring back in the mirror at him. And let me explain. Julio Cesar Martinez has not only, in the past 2 years, has not only pulled out of a fight once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. He's pulled out of fights in the past 2 years. 4! Cuatro! That's how you say 4 in Spanish, right? Cuatro? When's this fight? This fight is Saturday night on DAZN, coming up in San Antonio, Texas. And you got an action-packed weekend of boxing because you have some other cards. You got Gonzalez versus Barriga, Egginson versus Zisk. You got Elwin Soto versus Butler. You got some fights that are flying under the radar this weekend that are going to be fun. Shout out to Annalie Jaramillo in the building as well. But just a great weekend of fights. And it culminates on DAZN this weekend. I keep telling people, watch the lower weight class. Guys, I understand it's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody likes to watch horse jockeys fight, but a lot of your great action fights happen underneath 130. And the reason they happen underneath 130 is because these guys naturally throw more punches. They're more entertaining. They also have a high skill level. And on top of all that, being that they don't get rewarded monetarily the way guys in the upper weight class fighters do, who get rewarded monetarily favorably for fighting average opposition and being inactive, fighting once, maybe twice per year. These guys are forced into legacy fights, multiple legacy fights, because they have to in order to get some money out of it. They don't have the privilege of being able to fight one average opponent per year and make a big name for themselves. Some of them do it, but they're not being rewarded handsomely for it, and they're not building a name for themselves in that process. But you got a lot of entertainment value down there, and you got a lot of meaningful fights happening for what you get. It's in San Antonio this weekend, and great year for boxing. That it is. This has been a great run from April up until now. It's just been a great run, and it continues. More fights being announced, and we'll talk about that as time goes on, day after day on this channel. Chauncey Pearl's in the building. I'm hyped for this fight. Anyone pumped for this one? And it's flying under the radar, like I said. But if you are a boxing nerd and you like the lower weight class fights, this is one that you got to show up for. I mean, just a phenomenal weekend on paper, because not only do you have Bam Rodriguez versus Saul Rungvisai in the main event, you were supposed to have McWilliams Arroyo versus Julio Cesar Martinez, but you also have MJ Akhmadaliev versus Ronnie Rios in a meaningful fight at 122. Two top 10 guys. Akhmadaliev currently ranked number 2 behind Stephen Fulton, and if he wins this fight, then that gets us to undisputed at 122 between Stephen Fulton and MJ Akhmadaliev, and these guys have been on a collision course at 122 for a while. Did I see Abner Maris is coming back? Yes, I did. And that card on September 4th is atrocious. PBC pay-per-view. They're actually charging people money for that card. You got Isaac Cruz against a guy that isn't even in the weight. He's following the Gamboa win with a guy who's not even at 135 pounds. Nowhere close to being ranked. He's just getting into 135. So Isaac Cruz underwhelming since the Tank fight. And then you have Abner Maris coming back. And I swear, man, I see it like Stevie Wonder. They're going to try to pitch a Tank Davis versus Abner Maris fight. Watch it. Don't doubt me on that. It may not develop, but it's in their head. It's in their head as a possible development. Don't doubt me on that. Terrible card. And it's also going up against college football, LSU versus Florida State that night. So good luck. Good luck. I kind of forgot about this fight, but should be a good one. And not only a good one, but a great one. But more on Julio Cesar Martinez. Pulled out of 4 fights in 2 years. And not only that, pulled out of 3 fights against Arroyo in the past 2 years. They fought once last year to a no contest. And the frustrating thing about Martinez is a lot of talent. If you watch the Arroyo fight last year, the no contest, leading up to the no contest and the headbutt, he was dominating those first 2 rounds. We saw where that was going, and it was leading towards Martinez stopping Arroyo. And Arroyo knew that, and he looked for a way out. I'm saying that respectfully because everybody who watched that fight knew it. So he looked for a way out, no contest. The frustrating thing about this is Julio Cesar Martinez was a huge favorite coming into this fight with McWilliams Arroyo. Huge favorite. Minus 800 favorite. Huge favorite, which means you have to put down $800 in order to win 100. That's how much Vegas thought about Martinez coming into this fight, stepping back down to 112 after losing to Chocolatito at 115. He was in over his head against the legend at Chocolatito at 115. But Martinez is a guy who can't get out of his own way. He continues to mess up these title defenses and pull out of fights. And when you pull out of a fight with a guy 3 times, and a guy you should beat, you proved that when y'all actually got in the ring with each other last year and you dominated the first 2 rounds of the fight. And we have a guy in Martinez who is fun to watch, who is a power puncher, who can send people to hell. But like I keep saying, he can't get out of his own way. And it's frustrating to watch. And he continues that with this. And maybe he's really ill, right? Maybe he is, but track record. We always talk about track record on this channel. If a guy has a track record of pulling out of fights, missing weight, it's not surprising that 2 days before a fight, he pulls out of a fight. 2-3 days before a fight, he pulls out of a fight. And when you hear illness, he's pulling out due to illness, you kind of wink, wink, right? An illness. Sure. Maybe he was having issues with weight. I'm not sure what it was, but pulls out of a fight. Hopefully McWilliams Arroyo gets a late replacement and we actually get to see him on this card because a good talent in his own right. Let's see. Tank versus Mars. Telling you, watch out for it. But the main event here, Bam Rodriguez versus Saul Rungvisai. I wanted to talk about it because it's flying under the radar. Not too many people here on the YTBC talk about lower weight class fights, unfortunately. They'd rather hit you with the clickbait. I have inside information about Spence versus Crawford negotiations. You see a million of those videos on YouTube, but you don't see too many people talking about actual fights this weekend. And there are actual fights this weekend, and fun ones at that, and meaningful ones on paper. And this is the main one this weekend. You know, we talk a lot about betting odds. And let me hit my screen share here just to properly break down what we're seeing with Bam Rodriguez versus. Y'all let me know if y'all see this in the comments section. This is actually on calixboxing.com. I have a write-up on the betting odds and preview of this fight on calixboxing.com this morning, and I'll drop a separate video actually doing a prediction of this fight here on YouTube later on today, along with my prediction for Akhmadaliev versus Ronnie Rios. I want to talk about Gonzalez versus Barriga in a separate video as well. Eggington versus Zisk. You'll see a lot of those prediction videos coming separately. But this right here is the betting odds for the fight. So Bam Rodriguez, as we talked about yesterday, pay attention to minus and plus. Minus is actually the favorite. Plus is the underdog. So Bam Rodriguez, Vegas is telling you right here that Bam Rodriguez is a clear favorite coming into this fight. And not only is he a clear favorite, he's a clear favorite by decision. These odds from top to bottom, if you look at the top line all the way down to the bottom, the prop bets start Bam Rodriguez decision all the way down. That paints a clear picture, if you take a screenshot there, of Vegas, the odds makers telling you that they believe Bam Rodriguez is going to win this fight by decision. And when I look at these odds right here, I don't see much value in playing and betting this fight because I think Bam Rodriguez is going to win this fight by decision. I think it's going to go over 10.5 rounds. Anytime you see 10.5 rounds, anytime Vegas gives you that number right there, they think it's going decision. And especially when they go 10.5 rounds and the over is in the minus, that tells you they have a really good feeling that this is going over. And that Bam Rodriguez is going to win the fight because he's minus 450, which once again means he's the minus, he's the favorite, and you have to bet $450 on him in order to win 100 back. So that's what this picture is telling you right here, and I agree with them. Look, let me give you some stats here on Sor Rungvisai because this is phenomenal. Sor Rungvisai is one of the most, he's one of the hidden treasures in boxing. People don't know him too much because his name is weird. He's got multiple names. The Thailand fighters have multiple names because they have names that are hard to pronounce here in America. So they give themselves names that are easier to pronounce. That's why if you go down to minimum weight and you see names like CP Fresh Smart Knockout or something like that, they're just trying to give themselves easier names to pronounce that are more appealing to American fight fans. So they're more universally recognized, right? And Sor Rungvisai is supposed to be a name that's easier to pronounce than, although it's still hard to pronounce, easier to pronounce than his original born name. Okay, but this is why I say he's a hidden treasure. He actually started off his career 1-3-1. So when you see his overall record, 55-1, it's actually better than that because he's one of those fighters like a Bernard Hopkins who had a blemish early in his career, lost his first fight. And Nonito Donaire, I believe, another guy who lost the fight early in his career, I believe. And Sor Rungvisai is one of those guys. He had multiple 4 blemishes in his first 5 fights. So when you see 55-1, his resume, his record is actually better than that. Because you're talking about a guy, if we look at trends, he's won 23 out of his last 24 fights. His lone loss since the Quadras loss in 2014, he's fought 24 times since then. His lone loss is a split decision loss in the rematch against Gallo Estrada. He split with Gallo Estrada, swept Chocolatito in 2017, once by decision, debatable decision, and then knocked him out in 2017. This is who we're talking about, Sor Rungvisai. And the reason I say he's a hidden treasure is we're not talking about him the way we talked about Golovkin at 160, the way we talk about Beterbiev at 175, because those guys are in the higher weight classes. We're not talking about him the way we talk about a Deontay Wilder at heavyweight. But this guy has all the power, pound for pound, that those guys do. And he's every bit the boogeyman, if not more, in his division that those guys are or were. 115 is a shark tank, absolute shark tank, full of killers. And I'll pull that up actually right now. Let me share. Let's pull this up right here. Let me show you the rankings Ring Magazine at 115. Look at this right here. Estrada, the champion. Rungvisai, the main challenger. Chocolatito, number 2. Ioka, the third challenger. Fernando Martinez with the IBF. Joshua Franco. Then his brother, Bam Rodriguez. Think about this. Ring Magazine is saying right now that according to rankings, Bam Rodriguez is the 7th ranked fighter at 115. And we're talking about a guy who is one of the best talents in the sport coming up. He's only fought a few times there, moved up to pick off Carlos Cuadras' belt in the last fight, right? And he's sticking around at 115. Think about this. This is another thing that lower weight class fighters are undervalued for this reason. People think just because between 108 and 112 there's only 4 pounds, that's not as big of a jump. 112 to 115, only 3 pounds is not as big of a jump. It is. It's like going up from welterweight to middleweight. There's a reason that the weight classes are spaced out the way they are, and the lower you get, the smaller, fewer pounds separate each division. It's a percentage thing, right? The percentage between 108 and 112 is the same as the percentage between 140 and 147, give or take a few percentage points. So it's special for a guy to win a belt, move up to 115, win a belt, a legitimate belt, legitimate championship, and then do it in a weight class where he's 2 weight classes north of a weight class he can still make. So he can go back down to 112, 108, still make that weight, correct? But he's sticking around at 115 in the toughest division in boxing, I would argue. And not only that, he's facing the toughest SOB in that weight class in Rungvisai. Rungvisai is an absolute killer. He's a boogeyman. He's a boogeyman. It's just phenomenal what he's doing here. Shout out Chicano Prophet, Team Batman Boxing in the building. Bam's taking this. I agree. Really good card, though. Has Martinez pulled out? He has. He has pulled out of the fight. Chocolate beat. So I thought Chocolatito won that first fight as well, but it was close. That is a murderer's row. Absolute murderer's row. All those fought round robin are spectacular fights. Yep, he's claiming he's sick. He's fat. You can match up any of those 7 fighters and will be fireworks and very competitive. They should do like a Super 6 tournament with those fighters. I agree. Rooting for Bam is revenge for Chocolatito, one of my favorite fighters. Chocolatito also one of my favorite fighters and a guy who still fits into this picture. And oh, by the way, we're supposed to be getting Gallo Estrada versus Chocolatito trilogy. And I felt Chocolatito won both of the Gallo Estrada fights myself. But look at this murderer's row on the screen. This is why I say it's the deepest and most talented division in boxing. It's just flying under the radar. Up there with 140, 147s becoming a talent-rich division as young guys like Boots and Virgil and Stanionis and Conor Benn step up. And you got Crawford and Spence at the top. But this ranks amongst those, if not better. If not better. And some more on the Rat King, Rungvisai. 23 out of the last 24, and his only loss is to a future Hall of Famer and Gallo Estrada in the split decision. 2 close fights with Gallo Estrada. Not only that, 43 KOs in his 50 victories. And that's against great competition. He's facing guys like Chocolatito multiple times, Gallo Estrada multiple times, amongst others. He's facing top guys in his division night in and night out. And he's racked up 43 victories in 50 fights. That's undeniable punching power. But on top of that, he's not a one-trick pony because you can't go through the resume that he's gone through and rip through it and become one of the best fighters in the sport if you're a one-trick pony, if you just have power. It's not going to happen. So there are levels and versatility to his game, layers, right? Layers to his game. It's not just punching power, but punching power is the last to go, and he still possesses that. This is the wild card in this fight, and I think this is what Bam's team is looking at, and one of the reasons that they jumped at this fight right now. Because when this fight was announced, all of us were like, who follow the lower weight class were like, Bam's doing what? Excuse me, come again? Bam's doing what? He's staying at 115 and he's doing what? He's fighting Rungvisai. Is that what you're telling me? Because there were multiple off ramps that Bam could have taken, could have went down in weight, could have got some exceptions to not fight Rungvisai right now, aged him out a little bit if he's sticking around at 115. He could have taken some off ramps, but instead he purposely drove to Rungvisai's house and ended up on his doorstep. And people just don't do that. Average fighters do not do that. And this is why I'm high on Bam Rodriguez. It's not only the eye test. It's not only what I'm seeing in the ring. It's not only the resume that he's doing what he's doing in 5 years, 22 years old, 15 fights. It's if you read between the lines, and I say this often on this channel, you can tell everything you need to know about a fighter by two things. How do his handlers handle him? And how do his peers in and around the weight class react when his name is brought up? His peers respect him. On top of that, his handlers are handling him aggressively. And you can only do that if you have ultimate confidence in your fighter. We've seen other examples where they're handlers of certain fighters, they're like, we're going to stick around. We're going to veer around this guy, that guy. And these guys end up 7, 8, 9, 10 years into their career without big wins, without great opposition. And that tells you everything you need to know about that fighter, because their handlers don't respect them as much as they're leading on. They see something behind the scenes that other people do not see. On top of that, the fighter may not be as confident in their ability as they're saying, because if they did, they would be demanding the big fights that they haven't gotten up until that point. Bam Rodriguez's handlers are saying, you know what? Let's stick around at 115 and fight Rungvisai. And after that, we'll talk about moving down to 112, possibly winning some belts there. They're talking about moving around multiple weight classes and fighting top opposition in multiple weight classes. But a normal fighter does not fight two weights above what they can make and pick a fight with the toughest SOB in that weight class. Normal fighters don't do that, man. So if you're reading between the lines, everything is pointing towards this dude, this 22-year-old dude, baby-faced, Bam Rodriguez, being an absolute special talent coming up in the sport. Choclo lost to Rungvisai on the rematch only. He should have that loss on his record only. In the future, they should really have these lighter weight classes fight co-main events with the bigger superstars, like when Choclo was co-main for Triple G and how Chavez was with Tyson. Good point. Bam has balls of iron. He doesn't give a damn about saving his O like all these PBC fighters. Agreed. How I wish Carbajal and Chiquita Gonzalez were around today to fight these animals. Would put the heavier weights to shame. Yeah, all of that. All great points. But I just keep going back to, in my preview and prediction for this fight, Bam Rodriguez can do everything, right? He's got enough punching power to keep you honest. 10 knockouts in 15 fights. He can use angles. He showed that. This will be southpaw versus southpaw. And Bam is better with the lateral movement. He's going to set up his shots better, and he's going to keep Rungvisai honest. But Rungvisai is a tough dude, so Rungvisai is going to have moments in this fight where you're like, can Bam get through this? Can Bam get through this round? He's going to lay some punches on Bam, and Bam's going to have to go 12 rounds with this guy. And if you can go 12 rounds with Rungvisai, you have a great chin. I think Bam does have a great chin. If he didn't, I think his team would be veering away from this fight. What them taking this fight now tells me that, one, Bam has a great chin. Two, they have confidence that Bam can outbox Rungvisai. They see something stylistically that they can take advantage of when it comes to Rungvisai. And I'll tell you another thing they're looking at. We're looking at a guy in Rungvisai who's 56 fights in. So he's got some wear and tear. He's well past what he was in his prime. This is not the Rungvisai that sent Chocolatito to hell 5 years ago. Not the same guy. Bam Rodriguez is not going to be fighting the same guy that Chocolatito fought 5 years ago. But still very dangerous. Still very dangerous. But what they're also looking at is Sora Rungvisai is coming off of a 15-month layoff. So they want this fight. They want to jump on Sora Rungvisai early, sort of shock him, and then use the lateral movement to outbox him as the fight goes on. And I'm a believer in these Vegas odds. That's why I don't see value. I don't think Vegas, I think they price this fight perfectly. I don't see any fault in how they price this fight, which tells you I don't see any value, which is why I'm staying away from this fight as far as betting. I think they priced it perfectly. I think they've told the perfect story. Sora Rungvisai will have moments in this fight. He will win some rounds, but I think Bam Rodriguez's chin will hold up. And I think for the most part, he will outbox the slower, more plotting Sora Rungvisai. He'll use the lateral movement, use the angles, break the action when he needs to. But the thing that is the wild card here for Bam Rodriguez is he does keep his hands free, right? So Sora Rungvisai will have openings when it comes to hitting Bam Rodriguez, because Bam Rodriguez throws a lot of punches, great combination puncher. Like I said, great foot movement, great footwork, great at setting punches. I just don't see too many weaknesses in his game, but he does keep his hands free. He's not a clinchy fighter like sort of what we saw with Devin Haney against Kambosos. He's not going to be breaking up the action a lot. So Rungvisai will have moments in this fight where he touches up Bam Rodriguez. But ultimately, I think Bam Rodriguez gets through the 12 rounds. And I think Vegas is right here. It's going to go over. It's going to go to decision, and Bam Rodriguez will win on the scorecards. That's my prediction for this fight. And it will be a shining moment for Bam Rodriguez, because I think he's one of those guys who, as the moment gets bigger, he rises. What my question mark for Bam Rodriguez will be down the road, though, will he be like a Mikey Garcia type of guy? Remember when Mikey Garcia was in the lower weight classes and he was just outboxing guys, making guys look foolish. And then as he had trouble with weight and had to move up, you started to see the limitations in Mikey Garcia, and he didn't seem to have it mentally. I don't think Bam Rodriguez is cut from that cloth. He seems to have it all up here. He seems to be one of those young American fighters coming up the ranks who has it, who's a hard worker, a guy like Stephen Fulton, a guy like Shakur Stevenson, maybe a guy like Devin Haney. These guys moving up, Boots Ennis, these young American fighters who were moving up the ranks and not only have talent, but have the attitude and the temperament to back it up as well. Mentally strong fighters as well as physically strong fighters. I think Bam's cut from that cloth, and I think you're seeing a special generation of young American talent coming up. And not only young American talent, just young talent in general, universally in boxing. I think the sport, as these past 3-4 months have shown us, is in a very healthy spot. I think this handoff that's happening between the older generation of fighters to the younger generation of fighters has been one of the healthiest handoffs that we've seen in boxing in some time. Bam has great lateral movement and can hit those angles. Reminds me a lot of Lomachenko operates. That's right. When I was watching him fight Carlos Cuadras, it was reminiscent of things that Lomachenko was doing, say, against Comey, Nakatani, still using those angles. Still, by the time you counter him, he's already gone. He's gone. And I think you're going to see a lot of that with Sora Rungvisai fight. But Rungvisai will have some success in this fight as well. So you always have to throw out that wild card that Rungvisai can catch him with a shot that's going to equalize the fight, because he has that equalizer. He is a real-life boogeyman at this weight. He is. The other fight on this card, another one flying under the radar, MJ Akhmadaliev versus Ronnie Rios. Now, much like the fight we just talked about, also a top 10 matchup at 122. Akhmadaliev ranked number 2, Ronnie Rios ranked number 8, according to Ring Magazine. So Akhmadaliev is fighting a legit top 10 guy, and Akhmadaliev and Stephen Fulton have been on this collision course at 122. Right? They fought similar opposition. They both look good against similar opposition, although Fulton looked better against Roman than MJ Akhmadaliev looked against Roman. But a good top 10 matchup here, a meaningful fight. And if Akhmadaliev gets past this fight, which I believe he will, then we'll have an undisputed fight set up between Stephen Fulton and MJ Akhmadaliev, undisputed at 122. What makes that even more meaningful is if we get an undisputed champion at 122 in the next two fights, and then we get Inoue versus Butler at 118, we then have neighboring undisputed champions who can face off against each other, right? We would have Inoue then possibly moving up to 122 to face the winner of Stephen Fulton and MJ Akhmadaliev in a super fight in the lower weight classes, in a meaningful fight, a legacy fight. Ronnie Rios is fun to watch. He is, but I think he's going down in this fight. And I like Rios. But much like we were just talking about with Saul Rungvisai, a common denominator between them is he's coming off of a 16-month layoff. So Rios hasn't fought in almost a year and a half. This is orthodox versus southpaw, so look out for headbutts. Watch the feet. The feet will get tangled up, all that good stuff. So it will get ugly at times, but the good thing about this is both fighters keep their hands free and both fighters throw combination punches. So we'll have fun action in this fight as well. Number 2 versus number 8. Akhmadaliev, for those who don't know him and haven't watched him, very good fighter. 10-0, 7 KOs. So he's a guy who can punch. And he's fun to watch. And much like RM is saying here, Ronnie Rios, a guy who's fun to watch. He will put together combination punches and he'll dig into the body. One of the things that Rios has an issue with, though, is he's not a power puncher. I believe it's 16 knockouts in 33 fights, so his KO percentage is less. 16 KOs in 36 fights, so his KO percentage is less than 50%. I think it's like 44%. And 2 of his 3 losses came by knockout, so he can be stopped. I think he's got 4 straight wins, so he's on a nice streak here. He's on a nice streak. Here's the interesting thing about the odds. All right. Akhmadaliev is a clear favorite here, minus 650. Remember, minus is the favorite. You have to bet 650 in order to win 100. So Vegas is telling you, the odds makers, once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but they believe that Akhmadaliev is going to win this fight and that Rios is a heavy underdog coming into this fight at plus 475. But this is the line I like this weekend. And this is the line I'm going to play. And I'll show receipts on Twitter. Calix Boxing 2. I see value in the over-under in this fight at 9.5 rounds. And remember, as I explained yesterday, when they say over-under 9.5 rounds and they give you even odds, they're saying they believe that this fight's going to get dicey for the underdog around that time. They think that Akhmadaliev is going to start to methodically break down Ronnie Rios around that time. And it can go over or under 9.5 rounds. And also remember, 9.5 rounds means you complete the 9 rounds and halfway through the 10th round, when the 10th round reaches 1 minute and 30 seconds, that's when the over-under splits in half. So if you take over 9.5 rounds, you're thinking that Ronnie Rios will last late into the 10th round and past. If you're thinking that the under is going to hit, which I think is going to happen, you're thinking the fight will stop before halfway through the 10th round. The reason I believe that's going to happen, and the reason I'm betting the under here and see value, is what I was just saying. Rios has been stopped 2 out of 3 times in his career. So he's shown he can be stopped. But also the lack of punching power and the fact that he can be flat-footed and come straight at you, I think he's going to be right in Akhmadaliev's wheelhouse as the fight goes on. And I just can't help but think that Akhmadaliev is going to catch him with a big shot that's going to really hurt Ronnie Rios. And Akhmadaliev is going to be able to finish the job and stop it before the 10th round comes along. So I think we're going to see a Akhmadaliev stoppage or knockout halfway through this fight, somewhere in the middle rounds. I just think Ronnie Rios can be too flat-footed. He's going to try this. That's who he is, right? He's a guy, and this is southpaw versus conventional, so it'll get ugly, but watch the front foot placement. I think that Akhmadaliev is going to get his foot placement to where he can set up that left hand. I think he's got faster feet, faster hands. Ronnie Rios has nice hand speed as well, but And he goes well. He does well at changing levels. Goes to the body, goes back upstairs. So he's going to hit Akhmadaliev. He's going to touch him up. But you're going to see the difference in punching power. And then you're going to see Ronnie Rios be Ronnie Rios and trade. He's going to stay in the pocket, walk down Akhmadaliev and trade. And as he does that, you're going to see the difference in ammunition level, right? You're going to see a butter knife versus a machete. There's a difference between Rios's punching power and Akhmadaliev's punching power. And I think that's going to be the difference in this fight. Rios might win rounds. Rios is going to look good in rounds. Rios is going to hit Akhmadaliev. He's going to touch him up. But when the trading occurs, even if Akhmadaliev is landing 1 to 2 to Rios's 5 or 6, those 1 or 2 punches that Akhmadaliev is landing, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. MJ's a beast. He's a beast. Bam going to stop Rungvisai. I don't know about a stoppage. I don't know. I agree with Vegas there. Like I think the over-under being set at 10.5 and you having to bet, what's the over? The over is -270. I think Vegas is telling you what they believe is going to happen, that this thing is going to go over. It's going to decision. Vegas believes in Bam's ability. Vegas believes in Bam's chin to hold up to Rungvisai over 12 rounds. They think it's going to be a special night for Vegas, and I agree. But I don't see a stoppage in this fight. I don't think he's going to stop Rungvisai. Hope I'm wrong, though, because I would love to see Bam put on that type of a performance. Ahmed going to smoke Rios. I tend to believe, I tend to agree. I just think that Rios is outgunned here. His style fits right into Akhmadaliev's style. He's going to walk forward. He's going to be flat-footed, and he's got nice hand speed. He puts together nicely his combination punches. He trades, he changes levels, all that good stuff. He's a good body puncher, but he's not a big puncher. Less than 50% KO percent. I think it's like 44%. And he's been stopped twice before. And Akhmadaliev is a nice talent coming up. And I just think the boxing gods, they're not going to stop this collision course that's occurring between Stephen Fulton versus Akhmadaliev. And then, in my opinion, the collision course that's going to happen between Inoue and Stephen Fulton, because I don't think Akhmadaliev is going to beat Stephen Fulton, and I don't think Paul Butler has a chance against Inoue. I think these collision courses are going to occur, and Ronnie Rios isn't going to be the guy to stand in the way of that. MJ didn't look great in his last fight. You're right. You're right. But we've seen that trend in boxers before, and we've seen it recently. Like, how many guys have we seen recently who put on career best performances, but the performance before that, they didn't look all that good. They didn't look all that good. I just think that the trend that we're on now is going to continue, where Bam Rodriguez is not only going to win, but he's going to put on a great pound-for-pound top 10 type performance. MJ Akhmadaliev, although he didn't look good in his last fight, he's going to put on one of those performances that you're like, well, wait a second. Maybe this guy can beat Stephen Fulton. Maybe he can beat Stephen Fulton. I think this trend of the top fighters putting on top performances is going to continue this weekend. And we've got multiple fights this weekend that are flying under the radar. I talked about Bam Rodriguez versus Rungvisai. You've also got Gonzalez versus Barriga, Eggington versus Zisk. You got Elwin Soto versus Butler. You got some fights this weekend to choose from. But it all culminates with Bam Rodriguez and Rungvisai. I still can't get over the fact that Bam has stayed at 115 and he's fighting this guy. It's just not something normal fighters do. It's just not. I think people are not appreciating this enough. Even the people that are appreciating, I don't think are appreciating it enough. I got Jesse Bam Rodriguez winning by decision against Rungvisai. Bam has great footwork, lateral movement, and handle. He's also the better boxer. Yeah, and the better boxer doesn't always win. It's all about style, stylistically. And I'll also say that Rungvisai's boxing ability is undervalued as well. You have to set up those punches. You can't go through the resume he's gone through and win 23 out of your last 24 fights if all you has is blunt force power. You have to set up those punches. You have to have layers to your game. You have to be versatile. And Rungvisai in that fashion is undervalued, because when you go through 24 fights, the 24 fights he's gone through since the Carlos Cuadras fight in 2014, and your only blemish is a split decision loss to Gallo Estrada. Whew. If he was in the higher weight classes, we'd be talking about him like we talk about Golovkin, how we talk about Beterbiev right now, how we talk about Deontay Wilder, just a boogeyman in this division who has pound for pound power and can destroy guys. A boogeyman, a real life boogeyman. Vector from Stranger Things 4. That's where Rungvisai, that's how he's built, man. He's built. He can take your senses away. He can knock the senses out of you like that, one punch. And he can also methodically break you down. And this is my point. To my point, Javier Martinez, great point. Bivol didn't look good versus Richards, but looked like $1 million versus Canelo. Bivol and Beterbiev, both of them in that fight. I was just saying to myself, like, it doesn't look like these guys come out of third gear. So once they get in a big fight, are they going to be able to step it up in fifth gear? And they were. There were two guys who, as the moment got bigger, they got better. Bivol and Beterbiev, leading up to the Canelo fight, leading up to the Joe Smith Jr. fight, their performance or performances before that were pretty much lackluster. They were winning, but I didn't think they were looking great winning. They certainly didn't look like pound for pound top 10 talents in winning. Now they do. And Bam Rodriguez and a guy like MJ Akhmadaliev are going to continue with this trend, in my opinion, where we're seeing top fighters put on top performances when the lights get the brightest. It's only because Canelo should not be fighting at that weight. Perhaps, and Canelo needs to stay at 168. I think we've established that, like, Canelo needs to stay away from the Russians at 175. Canelo needs to plant his feet at 168 and say, bring it. Bring me your top fighters at 168. Bring me Golovkin at 168 in September. I'll fight Ryder over there in the UK, and then we can talk about Benavidez after that at 168, the number 2 guy at 168. Possibly Charlo in the future. But I think he needs to leave Bivol and Beterbiev alone, because I think, in my mind, the only guy who can beat Bivol is Beterbiev. The only guy who can beat Beterbiev is Bivol. And that's no disrespect to Zerto. Just saying, I think those two guys are in a class of their own. Holyfield didn't look good against Zick, but looked like $1 million KOing Tyson. Certain guys, and I think there's a lot of guys, they fight to their level of competition. I think that's most of boxing. No BS. My brother's wife is good friends with Zerto mom. They spoke last night. Zerto said Bivol doesn't want that fight. Not going to happen. We'll see. Does a win for Rungvisai lock up Hall of Fame? I'll put it this way. If I had a vote for Hall of Fame, and it's always tough answering these questions because you don't know who these guys are going to be up against, right? Like I always said, Carl Froch, and people are going to disagree with me on this, is a Hall of Fame fighter. But if I was voting last year, if I was voting for this year's class, I wouldn't have voted for Carl Froch because the competition he was up against was too steep. I was not voting for him over 6 or 7 guys on that list. I would have put Carl Froch on that list like number 8, somewhere around there. The class, the guys that were in this, up for Hall of Fame in this class, the modern fighters, it was too strong of a list to consider Carl Froch. And you get to vote for 5 of them. 3 made it. But Carl Froch wasn't in the top 5 for me. And that's what makes this difficult is, and people view lower weight class fighters different. You had lower weight class fighters up for Hall of Fame in this class that didn't get the recognition they deserved. Because like I said, I think you can pick 5 modern fighters. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong. They picked 3. But you had lower weight class fighters who deserved better recognition, a higher percentage of votes than they got.
And that's what guys like Rungvisai have going against him. They're from Thailand. Even American journalists don't respect him as high as they should. They don't respect the resume, but already, in my opinion, he has a Hall of Fame worthy resume already, despite what happens in this fight this Saturday. So yes, if he wins, I think it puts the exclamation point on it. But once again, perception is everything, and they perceive lower weight class fighters differently than they perceive upper weight class fighters. It's a different respect level, unfortunately. And I don't know, man. It depends on who's up in that particular year, but you have a bunch of years that you qualify for to be on the list. So I can't see Rungvisai going year after year after year after year after year and being shut out. I think that would be a disservice to Rungvisai in his career. It's a good card. I was impressed with Bam's fight against Quadras. Rungvisai will definitely test Bam's mettle. Akhmadaliev beats Rios. Did the Arroyo versus Martinez fight get canceled? Yes, it did. It is canceled due to Martinez once again pulling out of a fight. Unreal. Fourth in the past 2 years, or vice versa. I don't think Bam, if you're saying Bam, if Bam would beat Rungvisai, he wouldn't be Hall of Fame worthy yet. Still way too early, if that's what you're asking, Nando. WBA can force Bivol hand. That's right. I would love to see Bivol versus Zurdo get made right now. Make the fight. Or Bivol versus Buatsi would be a good fight, but there are good fights to be made for Bivol. And I would love, on top of the list for me, is Bivol versus Zurdo. Make it. Zurdo's saying he wants it. So why not give us Bivol versus Zurdo? Cross promote, get the fight done. If we're not getting Beterbiev versus Bivol next, give us that fight, because Yardy's a done deal. The Yard fight in October is a done deal for Beterbiev. So give me Bivol versus Zurdo. That would be at the top of my list, Nando. As yours, I believe. Winky Wright always fought to the level of his competition. He looked bad versus Angel Hernandez and Sam Solomon. He did look bad against Sam Solomon, but looked great versus Mosley and Trinidad. Yep, and it's not only that, it's styles, right? Stylistically, Sam Solomon was an awkward dude. And he was able to get around with his awkward style and with his wide punches. He was able to get around the shell that Winky Wright presented. You know how Winky Wright fought. All right. Right hand dominant fighter, but he fought in a southpaw stance, led with the jab, shell coming forward. And Sam Solomon was able to get around that shell with his awkward punches as Winky Wright sort of blinded himself. And that was a close fight. That got sketchy for Winky. Chaco Hall of Fame, yes. Rungvisai, no. We'll see. Chaco is definitely in there, first ballot. Rungvisai, I hope people show him the respect that he deserves. Estrada is on the fence. I think Estrada's in. I think Gallo Estrada's in, I would say. And I'll probably never get a Hall of Fame vote. Probably never happen. But if I'm mythically doing these lists, there's no way that I can see a scenario in which Gallo Estrada doesn't get in. He's got to get in. If Barry McQuiggan can get into the Hall of Fame, then let's open up the floodgates. If Carlos Palomino can get in, open the floodgates. And people say that about Arturo Gatti too, if he can get in. Shame that fight is off. Martinez needs to get his ish together. That's right. If Arturo Gatti and Chiquito Gonzalez can get in, let's open up the floodgates. Calix, don't tell Canelo what to do. How dare you? Yeah, I can't do that. But Canelo holds the shots, and Canelo, I think, is I think he's too proud of a dude, and he's too competitive to stay away from a Bivol rematch. And more power to him for that. I mean, I'm glad he's testing himself. I'm just saying, like, there's no shame in saying 175 is not for me right now. I bit off more than I can chew there. I'm going to humble myself. I'm going to stay at 168. I'm the best fighter here at 168. And I'm going to take on all comers here. But I think he's too proud for that. I think the Bivol fights rematch is going to happen at some point, and I think it's going to it's going to get in the way of Bivol versus Beterbiev, undisputed, which Bivol has said he wants, Beterbiev has said he wants. So I wish they would make it now, but it looks like it could be 3 fights off if Canelo exercises rematch clause for May of 2023. Sam Solomon's awful. Sam Solomon's still fighting, Nando. Still fighting. He fought like a month or 2 ago for an Australian title. So he's still fighting at the domestic level in Australia. And that guy's in excellent shape. Excellent shape. I saw something one day about 10, 15 years ago to where he was running a marathon every day. He was running like 26 miles per day in the mountains. So that guy had a motor. But like you said, he was not the most technically sound. Not the most technically sound guy, but awkward style. And he presented some issues for guys. I forgot how the Sam Solomon-Jermaine Taylor fight went, but I remember those 2 guys fighting late in their career. Zurdo and Munguia are on the tricycle. That's right. But it looks like Zurdo wants to get off. And it sounds like Munguia wants to get off. It sounds like they want top guys. So we'll see how that develops. See how it develops. ESPN Plus might have a good fight this weekend as well. They do. And I think that's is that Gonzalez versus Barriga, or is that Eggington versus Zisk? I forgot, but that Barriga fight should be good. He's a live dog from the Philippines. That's the Mexican, and Canelo can't take no for an answer. Look at the Marquez. It took him 4 times. Yeah. What channel is the BAM card on? That is on DAZN. Or as Bob Arum would say, Dead Zone. And I don't agree with that. Marathon every day. Sheesh. That's right. Sam Solomon was a beast. He had a motor on him. He was a beast as far as cardio, not as far as a fighter. Awkward style. But just to wrap this up, Bam Rodriguez, I got him by decision. I got MJ Akhmadaliev stopping Ronnie Rios in the middle rounds. And my play of the weekend that I am playing is the under on the Akhmadaliev fight. I think he's going to stop Ronnie Rios before 9.5 rounds. So we'll see how that goes, but I will be posting that receipt on Twitter later on. On that note, man, y'all, God bless. See y'all later on.